Hello everybody, welcome to ASL, Ahmedabad School of Linguistics, and I'm your host Ronak Vaidya. So in today's session, we are going to learn the concept of relative sentences. Now, this is a very crucial concept, not just from A2 point of view, but once again also from B1 point of view, because this is the concept that you are going to very frequently use in A2 as well as B1. Okay, so it would make sense to learn this concept very thoroughly. Okay, so let's start. Now, as it has been our habit that how we learn a concept, we generally dissect the title itself. We generally dissect the heading itself, because heading, the title, it kind of summarizes the entire topic. So let's try to understand the title here first. The title is relative sentences. So there are two words here, relative and sentences. So first of all, forget about that you are learning a language. Okay, just as a layman, can you tell me what would you understand when you hear this term relative sentences? Yeah, so relative sentences, as a layman, I would assume that sentences which are related to each other. Yeah, relative sentences means sentences which are related to each other. Fine, yes, I understand. Okay, relative sentences mean sentences that are related to each other. But how do I know that these sentences are related to each other? How do we know that? How do we come to conclude that yes, these are two sentences and they are related to each other? So let me give you an example. This is the man, this is a man, and this man helped me yesterday. This is the car, okay, this car I want to buy. So let's pay attention to these four sentences that we just now spoke. This is a man and this man helped me yesterday. Are these two sentences related to each other? What do you think? Answer is yes, they are related to each other. And how do we know that they are related to each other? Because in both the sentences, we are talking about the same person. Yeah. What about the second two sentences? This is the car, this car I want to buy. Once again, are these two sentences related to each other? Answer is yes, they are related to each other. And how do we know that they are related to each other? Same reason. Because that in both the sentences, we are talking about the same car. Okay. So, in answer to our question that how do we know whether the sentences that we are talking about, they're related or not, how do we know that? So, the answer is, we can know that by observing that there is some common thing in two different sentences. So that is to say, in two different sentences, we are talking about the same thing or person. The common stuff. Okay, fine, I get it. I know what is a relative sentence. Okay, what are relative sentences? So sentences which are related to each other. How are they related? Well, through some common stuff. And that common stuff, I like to call it relative word. Relative word. Okay, fine. So, because that is the common stuff. So, relative sentences are related to each other through a relative word. Fine. Okay. But why do I need relative sentences in the first place? Like I had two different sentences, okay, and they made perfect sense to me. Why do I need to complicate it? Answer is to avoid the repetition. Repetition of what? You might ask. Repetition of relative word. Because if we don't make a relative sentence such as this, that this is the guy who helped me yesterday, or this is the car which I want to buy. If we don't make, and this is a relative sentence, these are the example of relative sentences. This is the man who helped me yesterday. If I don't make such sentence, then what will happen? I will keep on repeating that relative word. And it would sound really odd that this is the guy and this guy helped me yesterday, and then I had lunch with this man, or I had lunch with this guy, and then this guy dropped me home. So this guy, yeah, it just keeps on repeating. It does not sound very good. So, in other words, to make the sentence compact, okay, and more pleasing, okay, we use relative sentences. Yeah. So once again, let's repeat. First of all, what are relative sentences? Relative sentences are the sentences which are related to each other. How are they related? Through a relative word. And why do we need this relative sentence? So to avoid this repetition of relative word. Fine, I understand what is it. Okay, why do I need it? Okay, and all those kind of thing. And when do I need? But now the question is, okay, how do I make a relative sentence? Fine, I understand the purpose of the relative sentence is to avoid the repetition of relative word. Fine, great, I understand it. But how do I avoid this repetition? So the answer is by using a pronoun. Noun is a word which replaces a noun. Yeah. And since we are using this pronoun in case of relative sentences, let's call it relative pronoun. Okay. So once again, how do I avoid this repetition of relative word? By using a pronoun in place of noun. But which noun? The relative word. Okay. So fine, I understand that, okay, I'm going to use a pronoun which is going to replace the relative word. I understand it. But what do I use as a pronoun? In English, if you see, we are using the WH words as pronouns like what, which, who, so on and so forth. But in German, we try to be a bit more specific. Since in German, we also have to deal with the concept of gender. So in German, what kind of relative pronoun we use? Once again, let me remind you that relative pronoun is nothing but a pronoun which replaces the relative word. So we are using the relative pronoun in place of the relative word in the second sentence, to avoid the repetition of the relative word. So in German, we use the articles normally. Okay, this relative pronouns, they are nothing but the gender of the relative word. And with minor exceptions, this gender, as a gender, what we use is definite articles itself. Okay. So once again, let's revise this entire concept so as to make it super clear. So what are relative sentences? Relative sentences are the sentences which are related to each other. And how are they related to each other? By or through a relative word. And why do we need these relative sentences? To avoid the repetition of these relative words. And how can we avoid this repetition? By using a relative pronoun in place of relative word. And what do we use as a relative pronoun in German language? So we use the gender. Okay, we use the gender of this relative words. Now one more important thing that let me remind you, that relative pronoun, in our class of connectors, we had already learned that relative pronouns, they work as third type of connector. And so since they are working as third type of connector, whenever we use them in that sentence, the verb would go at the end. Verb would go in the last position. So that's the concept. Now let's apply it. Okay, let's try to make some sentences. Now to make sentences using, in relative sentence, I personally prefer to have just one single rule. And you have to follow it like very, very strictly. Okay, you have to adhere to it. And that one single rule is immediately after the relative word in the first sentence. Immediately after the relative word. Immediately after the relative word, comma, and the second sentence must come. So let's say there is a first sentence, and as soon as I have the relative word in the first sentence, I have to put a comma and start the second sentence. Might sound a bit odd at this moment, but it will be super clear once we look at some of the examples. So let's start. By the way, let me tell you, to make correct sentences, a bit logical sentences in relative sentence, the easiest way is to also understand them in English. Because we make these relative sentences in German in exact same manner as we make them in English. The only difference lies in the relative pronoun and the verb position. Otherwise, barring these two things, everything else is same. Okay, so let's start. So let's say the sentence that we had just now seen, that this is the car which I want to buy. This is the car which I want to buy. Now this is a relative sentence, but what would be the normal sentence? The normal two different sentences would be, this is the car, I want to buy this car. Okay. Now what is, so first thing that you have to identify is what is the relative word here. The relative word here is obviously this car. So I need to replace the word this car from the second sentence by using a pronoun. So in English I am using which as a pronoun. So this is the car. Now instead of saying I want to buy this car, I'll say which I want to buy. Okay, so this is the car which I want to buy. Now let's make this. So this is our relative sentence in English. Now let's make this in German. So this is the car. Das ist das Auto. Das ist das Auto, comma, which I want to buy. For which I would be using gender. Now the gender of car is neutral. Okay, and so das. So das ist das Auto, comma, das, which I want to buy. But since a relative pronoun will work as third type of connector. Okay, so which I want to buy. So das ich kaufen will. The verb will go at the end. So das ist das Auto, das ich kaufen will. I hope it makes sense. As you can see. So, as you can see here, what is the relative word? Das Auto. What is the relative pronoun? Das itself in the second sentence. And the verb is at the end position. Now, let's do one more. This is the man who has helped me yesterday. This is the man who has helped me yesterday. So das ist der Mann. Now der Mann is our relative word. So comma. So das ist der Mann, comma, who has helped me yesterday. Now here who? So since the relative word is der Mann and the gender of that is, well, masculine, der. So I'm going to use der. Das ist der Mann, comma, der mir gestern geholfen hat. Das ist der Mann, comma, der mir gestern geholfen hat. Here, the relative word is Mann, relative pronoun der, and the verb is at the end. Let's do one more example. Okay, to understand this a bit deeply. Okay, and it will also teach you something which I have not mentioned so far. Let's say the sentence is, this is the pen which I want to buy. Now this sentence is very similar to the first type of sentence that we have used. So the sentence is, this is the pen which I want to buy. Sentence would, so in German it would be, das ist der Kuli. Das ist der Kuli, comma, den ich kaufen will. It will be den, D-E-N, and not there. Because in the second sentence, I want to buy the pen, okay, which I want to buy. So this is the pen, I want to buy this pen. That would have been the normal sentence. Okay, so this, our relative sentence is, this is the pen which I want to buy. Okay, so the original two different sentences would have been, this is the pen, I want to buy this pen. Now look at this sentence, the second sentence, I want to buy this pen. Here the pen is clearly the object, direct object, accusative, and so for the I should be using then. You have to understand one thing, that just because I am changing my verb position or I am replacing the relative word from the second sentence, that does not alter the meaning of the sentences. Okay, if something was object, it remains an object. If something was subject, it remains the subject, and it conveys the same meaning. And since pen was an object, and that to masculine, direct object, accusative, and so it would be then instead of simply using der. So instead of it being das ist der Kuli, der ich kaufen will, this answer, correct answer would be das ist der Kuli, den ich kaufen will. I hope it makes sense. Yeah. Let's do one more example. Okay, this time with a preposition. So let's say the two different sentences in English, they are, these are my friends, I'm going with my friends. So the relative word is my friends. And so the relative sentence would be, these are my friends, with them I'm going. Let's say I'm going to Germany. So the translation would be, das sind meine Freunde, these are my friends, das sind meine Freunde, comma, with them. Here, with is a dative preposition. Okay, so mit denen, so that is a difference. Okay, in our definite article table, dative plural is den, but in relative pronoun, dative plural is denen. So that is one exception. Okay, one difference I should rather say. So das sind meine Freunde, comma, mit denen ich nach Deutschland fahre. Das sind meine Freunde, comma, mit denen ich nach Deutschland fahre. With whom I'm going to Germany. I'm going to Germany, yeah, ich fahre nach Deutschland. So fahre goes at the end. Now, let's do last example to take the point home. Let's say the sentence is, this car is really beautiful, or this car is beautiful, I want to buy this car. Let's say these are the two original sentences. This car is beautiful, I want to buy this car. You have to make a relative sentence. Now, while making relative sentence, you are not allowed to change, the structure or the position of the sentences. So first sentence remains the first sentence, second remains the second sentence. So here the first sentence is, this car is really beautiful, or this car is beautiful, I want to buy this car. So what would be the relative sentence? Will it be like, this car is beautiful, which I want to buy? Well, then it breaks my rule, right? My rule is immediately after the relative word in the first sentence, there should be a comma and the second sentence. And the relative word is correct, this car. So after this car in the first sentence, immediately I should put a comma and I should start the second sentence. Correct? So this car is really beautiful, I want to buy this car. So it will be, in English, it will be something like this. That this car, comma, which I want to buy. Now, first sentence is remaining, right? So I should put a second comma. So this car, comma, which I want to buy, another comma, is really beautiful. So this car which I want to buy is really beautiful. Yeah, and you would have often seen such sentences. You know, if you are used to reading English stories or novels and things like that. Yeah. So this sentence would be in German: Dieses Auto, das ich kaufen will, another comma, ist wirklich schön or sehr schön, whatever you prefer. Dieses Auto, das ich kaufen will, ist wirklich schön. This car which I want to buy is really beautiful. Yeah. So, based on these sentences that we have seen, we can say that there are two different types of structures when we make relative sentence. First structure with just one comma, and second structure with two commas, right? And when do I have two commas? Well, it's logical, right? It's not always necessary that my relative word will always come at the end of the sentence. It's not necessary, right? At the end of the first sentence, it's not necessary that my relative word will always be at the end of the first sentence. It can be somewhere in the middle or at the beginning itself, as we have just now seen in our example. If it is at the end, well, it's great, fine. I can just put a comma and put the second sentence. So just one comma and my relative sentence will be made. But what if the relative word comes in the middle of the first sentence or at the beginning of the first sentence? As per my rule, I have to put a comma and start the second sentence. And so my first part will be remaining, right? Some part of the first sentence will be remaining. And for that, I have to put one more comma and put the remaining part of the first sentence. So this way, I have two possible structures with one comma and two comma. And I hope you understand now, okay, when I have to be using just one comma and when I have to be using two commas to make relative sentences. So let's look at those structures once again in detail. With just one comma, the structure would be the first sentence with obviously the relative word at the end, comma. If there is a preposition, fine. Or otherwise, immediately the relative pronoun and the second sentence with verb at the end. So first sentence, comma, relative pronoun, okay. Second sentence with verb at the end. If there is a preposition, then obviously there will be preposition immediately before the relative pronoun. So immediately after the comma. The structure with two commas. So first sentence with obviously the relative word, as soon as I have the relative word, comma, relative pronoun, second sentence with verb at the end, one more comma, and the remaining part of the first sentence. Obviously, once again, no need to say that if there is a preposition, then immediately it will take the precedence over relative pronouns. So immediately after the first sentence, comma, there would be a preposition and then there would be a relative pronoun. Just like in English. No difference. Now, the last thing, just for the sake of, clarity, okay, let me also tell you what are the relative pronouns in German language. So relative pronoun, since they are also based on the gender and the cases, as we have just now seen. So we know our four cases: nominative, accusative, dative, genitive, and the gender masculine, feminine, neutral, plural. So for nominative, it is der, die, das, die. For accusative, den, die, das, die. As you can see, it is just like our definite article. For dative, them, their, them, denen. So that is the exception. That is the difference. between our definite article table and relative pronoun table. So them, their, them, then. Instead of it being them, their, them, then, it will be them, their, them, then. And the last one, genitive, dessen, deren, dessen, deren. Instead of it being des, there, simply. So dessen, D-E-S-S-E-N, deren, D-E-R-E-N, dessen and deren. Dessen, deren, dessen, deren. I hope it is clear. Okay, this is a really crucial concept. Okay, but once you understand what is relative sentence, why do we make relative sentence the way we make? Okay, why do we need it? Okay, once you understand those basic stuff, then making a sentence, a relative sentence is super easy. I hope it makes sense. In case of any doubt, you know how to reach me. Till then, ta-ta.